She was left at the altar and married a black janitor, not knowing he was a millionaire. The accusation cuts through the Whitmore Museum like a blade. 200 people in evening gowns and tailored suits turn toward the center of the marble atrium. Security guards move closer. A woman in a designer dress stands with her arm extended, finger pointed like a weapon, her voice sharp enough to shatter glass. "This man," she says, loud enough for everyone to hear, "damaged a $300,000 painting." The man she's pointing at stands perfectly still. He's tall, dark-skinned, wearing a server's uniform that doesn't quite fit. His hands hang at his sides. The overhead lights catch the gray threading through his close-cropped hair. He doesn't speak, doesn't defend himself, just stands there with the kind of stillness that comes from surviving things worse than this. The woman takes a step closer. Her smile is sharp, satisfied. "I want him arrested," she says. "I want him fired, and I want everyone here to know exactly what kind of people this museum employs." The crowd murmurs. Phones come out, someone whispers. Then an older woman in pearls steps forward from the edge of the room. Her voice is calm, measured, and absolutely lethal. "Do you have any idea," she asks, looking directly at the accuser, "who you're talking to?" The question hangs in the air like smoke. The woman in the designer dress falters. Her smile cracks at the edges. The janitor, if that's what he really is, still hasn't moved. But something in his eyes shifts. Something that says he's done hiding, done being invisible, done letting people decide who he is based on what they think they see. And in that moment, the entire room realizes they've made a terrible mistake. If you believe that true power has nothing to do with wealth and everything to do with who you are when no one's watching, stay with this story, because what happens next will restore your faith in justice. Before we begin, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated because of how you looked? But to understand how we arrived at this moment, how a man with millions in the bank ended up holding a tray of champagne while being accused of a crime he didn't commit, we need to go back 6 weeks, to an October morning in Chicago, and a life built on silence. The alarm cut through the darkness at 4:30 in the morning. Marcus Webb reached over and silenced it with the practiced movement of a man who had been waking at this hour for 7 years. The room was cold. October in Chicago meant the radiators hadn't kicked in yet, and the pre-dawn air carried that sharp edge that made you want to pull the blankets tighter and ignore the world for another hour. He didn't have that luxury. Marcus swung his legs out of bed and stood. His knees protested slightly. 41 wasn't old, but the floors at the museum were unforgiving. He moved through the small bedroom of their Bronzeville row house, navigating by memory in the dark. The floorboards creaked under his weight. Down the narrow hallway past the bathroom with its dripping faucet he kept meaning to fix, into the kitchen where the fluorescent light buzzed to life overhead. Pancakes. Thursday meant pancakes. He mixed the batter by hand, measuring ingredients without really thinking about it. The rhythm was automatic now. While the griddle heated, he moved to Zara's door and knocked twice. "Up and at 'em, baby girl." A groan from inside, then movement. By the time she shuffled into the kitchen, braids sleep wild and eyes still half closed, the first stack was ready. Marcus set the plate in front of her and poured orange juice into a glass that had a small chip on the rim. "Sleep okay?" he asked. He smiled. Zara wasn't a morning person, never had been. They ate in comfortable silence. The kitchen was small, the table wedged between the counter and the wall, but it was theirs. Through the window, the sky was starting to shift from black to deep blue. Streetlights still glowed on their block, casting long shadows across row houses that all looked the same. At 6:15, they walked to the bus stop together. The air was crisp enough to see their breath. Zara had her backpack slung over one shoulder, her jacket zipped to her chin. Marcus carried nothing. His hands were deep in the pockets of his worn coat, and he walked with the unhurried pace of someone who had nowhere else to be for the next 14 hours. At the corner, they stopped. The bus wouldn't arrive for another 3 minutes. "Love you, Dad," Zara said. "Love you more," Marcus replied. It was their ritual, had been since she was 5. She grinned, then got on her toes and kissed his cheek. The bus appeared around the corner, brakes hissing as it slowed. Zara climbed aboard, found a seat near the middle, and pressed her hand to the window. Marcus raised his in return. Then she was gone. He stood there until the bus disappeared from view. Then he turned and walked home. The house felt emptier when she wasn't in it. Marcus climbed the stairs, pulled the blackout curtains closed in his bedroom, and set his alarm for 8 that evening. Sleep came slowly, the way it always did. His mind refused to quiet. But eventually, exhaustion won. When the alarm went off again, the house was dark. Marcus dressed in navy blue work pants and a matching shirt with his name stitched above the breast pocket. He ate leftover rice and chicken standing at the counter, drank water from the tap and checked his watch. 9:40. Time to go. The Whitmore Museum sat in the heart of downtown Chicago, a gleaming structure of glass and white stone that took up an entire city block. Marcus had worked there for 6 years. He knew every corner of it. The employee entrance was around back, down a set of concrete steps that led to a basement hallway. Marcus swiped his badge and stepped inside. The fluorescent lights were harsh after the darkness outside. The hallway smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee. He clocked in at the security desk. "Evening, Marcus," the guard said without looking up from his phone. "Evening, James." That was the extent of the conversation. It always was. Marcus retrieved his custodial cart from the supply closet and wheeled it toward the service elevator. The cart rattled slightly, one wheel refusing to roll straight. He made a mental note to replace it. Again. The museum at night was a different place than it was during the day. No crowds, no chatter, just silence and the hum of climate control systems keeping the art at the perfect temperature and humidity. Marcus started on the 3rd floor and worked his way down. He moved through the galleries with quiet efficiency. The wide dust mop glided across marble floors that cost more per square foot than most people made in a week. He emptied trash bins that were rarely full. He wiped down benches where visitors sat to contemplate paintings worth millions. And he noticed things. The way light from the track system caught the texture of a bronze sculpture, the small placard that had been moved slightly to the left, the faint scuff mark near the doorway where someone's luggage had scraped the wall. Most janitors wouldn't care. Marcus did. He paused in front of a painting he'd always liked. Abstract, mostly blues and grays, with streaks of gold that looked like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. The artist's name was written on a small card beneath it. Marcus read it even though he'd memorized it years ago. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Marcus turned. Dr. Elaine Harris stood a few feet away, her arms crossed, her expression warm but tired. She was in her mid-60s, with silver hair pulled into a neat bun and glasses that always seemed to be sliding down her nose. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus said quietly. "You have good taste." He didn't respond to that, just nodded and turned back to his cart. Dr. Harris watched him for a moment. There was something in her eyes, curiosity maybe, or recognition, but she didn't press. "Have a good night, Marcus," she said. "You too, Dr. Harris." She walked away, her footsteps echoing through the empty gallery. Marcus continued his rounds, trash dusting, mopping. The same tasks he'd done 1,000 times before. By 6 in the morning, the museum was spotless. He clocked out, said goodbye to James, and drove across town to pick up Zara from Mrs. Barbara Chen's apartment. The neighbor watched her in the mornings when Marcus's shift ended too late to be home before she woke. Zara was already dressed and eating cereal at Mrs. Chen's kitchen table when he arrived. "Morning, baby girl." "Morning, Dad." They walked home together as the city woke up around them. Zara talked about a test she had that day. Marcus listened, asked questions, made her laugh once. At home, he poured her another glass of juice while she grabbed her backpack. "Oh," she said, pausing at the door. "I forgot to tell you. We got assigned a project in English." "Yeah? What kind?" "We have to write about someone we admire, like interview them and everything." Marcus smiled. "That's a good project. You know who you're gonna pick?" Zara looked at him. Her eyes were thoughtful, serious in that way that made her seem older than 12. "Can I come to work with you one night?" she asked. "I want to see what you do." Something tightened in Marcus's chest. He kept his expression neutral. "You sure?" he said. "It's pretty boring." "I don't think so," Zara said. "I think you're interesting." Marcus didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. "Okay, we'll figure out a night." Zara grinned, kissed his cheek, and was out the door. Marcus stood in the empty kitchen, listening to her footsteps fade down the block. Then he sat down at the table and let out a long breath. She wanted to write about him. About a janitor who mopped floors and emptied trash and lived in a house that needed repairs he never got around to. If she only knew what he used to be, she'd pick someone else. 1 week later, Dr. Tarkay, Elaine Harris sat in the Whitmore Museum's conference room and tried not to let her expression betray what she was thinking. Gerald Whitmore stood at the head of the table, hands clasped behind his back, smiling the way men with inherited wealth always smiled when announcing decisions that had already been made. "I'm pleased to introduce our newest board member," he said. "Victoria Ashford comes to us with extensive experience in corporate consulting and a deep commitment to the arts. Her family has been generous supporters of this institution for 3 generations. Polite applause rippled through the room. Harris didn't clap. She'd already heard the rumors. Everyone had. 3 months ago, Victoria Ashford had been left standing at the altar of Fourth Presbyterian Church in a $12,000 gown while 300 guests whispered and a photographer's camera captured every second of her humiliation. The groom, a venture capitalist named David Chen, had apparently decided mid-ceremony that he wasn't ready for marriage. The footage went viral within hours. By evening, it was a meme. Now Victoria Ashford was a museum trustee. Harris glanced at the other staff members around the table. A few met her eyes. They knew what this was. Charity Whitmore's family owed Victoria's family some favor, and this appointment was payment. The meeting ended 20 minutes later. Harris gathered her folders and headed back to her office, already calculating how much damage one wounded, angry woman could do with a board vote and family money behind her. She found out that same night. Marcus was buffing the floor of the main atrium when the woman walked in. He noticed her immediately. Hard not to. She moved through the space like she owned it, heels clicking against marble, her posture radiating the kind of confidence that came from never having been told no. She was blonde, maybe mid-30s, wearing a tailored suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in 3 months. He kept working. The buffer hummed steadily in his hands, the circular pad spinning against the floor. He'd learned long ago that the best way to handle wealthy people in museums was to become invisible. It didn't work. Marcus looked up. The woman was standing 10 feet away, one hand on her hip, looking at him the way people looked at furniture that had been placed in the wrong spot. Yes, ma'am. I need to see the contemporary wing, the main gallery specifically. Marcus straightened. His back protested slightly. He'd been bent over the buffer for 40 minutes. I'm just custodial staff, ma'am, he said quietly. But I can call someone from administration if you need a tour. Her eyes narrowed. I don't need a tour. I'm on the board of trustees. I'm conducting an inspection. Of course. The contemporary wing is through that archway. He gestured with one hand. Second door on the left. She didn't move, just kept staring at him like she was waiting for something. Marcus returned to the buffer. He had 3 more sections to finish before his break. Behind him, he heard her heels click across the atrium. Then they stopped. Excuse me. He shut off the buffer and turned again. The woman was leaning against a sculpture near the far wall. It was a kinetic piece, all delicate metal arms balanced on a central axis. The placard beside it warned visitors not to touch. Ma'am, that sculpture is motion sensitive, Marcus said. If you lean on it, the alarm will. I don't take advice from the help. Her voice carried. Loud enough that James, the security guard, looked up from his post near the entrance. Marcus went still. The woman took a step closer. Her expression had shifted from dismissive to something sharper. Crueler. Let me make something clear, she said. I'm Victoria Ashford. The first, the 1000th. A member of this museum's board of trustees. And you're a janitor. That means when I'm in this building, you don't speak to me unless I ask you a direct question. Do you understand? Marcus's jaw tightened. He forced it to relax. Yes, ma'am. Good. Victoria smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Because frankly, I don't take advice from people whose biggest accomplishment is knowing which end of a mop to hold. The words echoed through the atrium. James shifted uncomfortably near his desk. He was looking down now, pretending not to hear. Marcus didn't respond. He just nodded once and turned back to his work. Victoria stood there for another moment, waiting. When Marcus didn't give her the reaction she wanted, she turned and walked toward the contemporary wing, her heels sharp and deliberate against the marble. The sound faded. The atrium went quiet again. Marcus restarted the buffer. Near the bench by the east wall, partially hidden behind a marble column, Zara sat with her sketchbook open in her lap. She'd been drawing the sculpture her father had just been warned about. Now her pencil was frozen above the page. She'd heard every word. The drive home was quiet. Zara sat in the passenger seat of Marcus's aging Honda, her backpack at her feet, her sketchbook clutched against her chest. The streets of Chicago blurred past the windows. Streetlights cast orange halos in the October darkness. Marcus kept his eyes on the road. His hands were steady on the wheel. Dad, Zara said finally. Yeah, baby girl, why didn't you say anything? Marcus glanced at her. Say anything about what? That woman, the mean one. Why didn't you defend yourself? He was quiet for a moment. At a red light, he stopped and let out a slow breath. Some people need to feel bigger than others to feel good about themselves, he said. That's their problem, not mine. Zara frowned. But that's not fair. No, it's not. So why didn't you tell her she was wrong? Why didn't you tell her she was being mean? Marcus looked at his daughter. She was staring at him with those eyes that saw too much, understood too much. Simone's eyes. Because she's in pain, he said quietly, and pain makes people forget how to be kind. The light turned green. Marcus pressed the gas. The car moved forward. Zara didn't say anything for the rest of the drive, but Marcus could feel her watching him, could feel the questions building behind her silence. When they got home, Zara went straight to her room. She didn't ask for help with homework, didn't come down for her usual glass of water before bed. Marcus stood in the kitchen and stared at nothing. He'd seen the look on his daughter's face in the car, the confusion, the anger, the first small crack in the way she saw the world. And he knew, with the certainty of a man who had lost too much already, that something had shifted tonight. Zara wasn't going to let this go. 2 weeks passed, and Victoria Ashford became a fixture at the Whitmore Museum. She attended every board meeting, arrived early, stayed late, asked pointed questions about budgets and operational efficiency. By her third meeting, she'd positioned herself as what she called an operations reformer, someone who cared about accountability and standards. What she really cared about was control. Marcus noticed the shift in his second week of November. Small things at first. A photograph taken of a baseboard he'd missed during his rounds. A notation on the staff bulletin board about break time compliance. A new sign-in sheet that required custodial staff to log every task completed during their shift. Then Victoria started showing up during his shifts. She'd walk through the galleries with her phone out, camera app open, documenting water spots on mirrors and dust on frames that Marcus had cleaned just hours before. She never spoke to him directly, just took her photos, made her notes, and disappeared. Marcus said nothing. He just cleaned more carefully. The real escalation came on a Thursday afternoon when Marcus's supervisor called him into the office. "They need you for the donor luncheon tomorrow," his supervisor said. He was a tired-looking man in his 50s who'd worked at the museum for 20 years. One of the servers called in sick. Marcus frowned. "I don't work daytime events. I know, but it's not optional. Board request." Marcus knew exactly which board member had made the request. The luncheon was held in the museum's banquet hall, a space with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Millennium Park. 50 donors sat at round tables covered in white linen, eating salmon and drinking wine that cost more per bottle than Marcus made in a day. Marcus wore a black vest and bow tie that the museum provided. He carried a tray of champagne flutes through the room, offering drinks to people who didn't look at his face when they took them. He'd been a server before, years ago, when he was building his first gallery and needed extra money. The work came back to him easily. Keep the tray level, move efficiently, stay invisible. Victoria sat at the head table, laughing at something a silver-haired man in a suit had said. Then she saw Marcus. Her smile didn't change, but something in her eyes sharpened. She watched him move through the room, watched him offer drinks, watched him navigate between tables. When he passed near her table, she spoke loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Careful with that tray. We can't afford to have champagne spilled on our donors." Heads turned. Marcus stopped. "Yes, ma'am," he said quietly, "and do try to smile. You're representing the museum." A woman at Victoria's table looked uncomfortable. The silver-haired man looked away. Marcus moved on. His hands stayed steady on the tray. 10 minutes later, Victoria found another reason to speak. Marcus was refilling glasses at a table near the windows when her voice cut across the room. No, that's not how you pour. You're going to create bubbles." Marcus paused. The donor, whose glass he was filling, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes, looked embarrassed for him. "It's fine," the woman said quietly. Victoria stood. She crossed the room in her heels, carrying her own glass. When she reached Marcus, she took the champagne bottle from his hand. "Like this," she said, demonstrating a pour that was identical to what Marcus had been doing. "It's about presentation, competence, attention to detail." She handed the bottle back to him. "I know you're accustomed to simpler work, but when we have events like this, we need staff who can rise to the occasion." The room had gone quiet. 50 donors watched. 3 servers stood frozen near the kitchen doors. Marcus took the bottle. "Yes, ma'am." Victoria smiled. She returned to her table. Dr. Elaine Harris, who'd been sitting near the back, stood and walked calmly across the room. She leaned close to Victoria and spoke in a voice too low for others to hear. "A word, please." Victoria's smile tightened, but she excused herself from the table. The 2 women stepped into the hallway. Through the doorway, Marcus could see them talking. Dr. Harris's posture was calm but firm. Victoria's arms were crossed. The conversation lasted less than a minute. When they returned, Victoria's expression was composed but cold. Dr. Harris returned to her seat. Victoria returned to hers. The luncheon continued. When Marcus's shift ended 2 hours later, Dr. Harris found him in the hallway outside the staff locker room. "I'm sorry about that," she said. Marcus shook his head. "It's fine. It's not fine. It's inappropriate. I spoke to her." "What did she say?" Dr. Harris's mouth tightened. "That I'm being sentimental about staff, that the museum needs accountability at all levels, that she's simply ensuring operational standards." Marcus nodded slowly. He'd expected as much. "She has board authority," Dr. Harris continued, "and her family's money behind her. But she doesn't have the right to humiliate employees. I appreciate you trying, Marcus." Dr. Harris looked at him carefully. "If she keeps this up, you need to document it. File a complaint." Marcus smiled faintly. "I think we both know how that would go." Dr. Harris didn't argue. She just pressed her lips together and nodded. "Be careful," she said. Then she walked away, leaving Marcus alone in the fluorescent-lit hallway. That same afternoon, Zara sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open and a notebook beside her. Her school project was due in 2 weeks. She'd chosen her father as her subject, but the more she tried to research him, the less she found. There was no social media, no online presence, no articles or mentions beyond a few generic directories listing his employment at the museum. It was like he hadn't existed before he started working there. Zara tried different searches. Marcus Webb Chicago returned nothing useful. Marcus Webb Custodian gave her employment databases. Marcus Webb Bronzeville showed real estate listings. She sat back and thought. Her father worked at an art museum. He noticed things about paintings that other people didn't. He moved through the galleries like he understood them in a way that went deeper than just cleaning them. On a hunch, she typed, "Marcus Webb Art." The search results loaded. Zara's breath caught. The first result was an article from 2014, Marcus Webb, Fine Arts closes after founder's personal tragedy. Below it, another from 2013, Rising Star Gallery owner brings fresh vision to Chicago art scene. And another from 2012, Marcus Webb, the man behind the Midwest's most exciting new galleries. She clicked the first link. The article was brief, sympathetic, vague about details. It mentioned a personal tragedy and difficult circumstances that had led to the closure of all 5 Marcus Webb Fine Arts locations. It praised the gallery's integrity and the owner's reputation for supporting emerging artists. But it was the photo that made Zara's hands go still on the keyboard. A younger version of her father stood in a gallery space wearing a tailored suit, his arm around a woman with rich brown skin and natural hair pulled into an elegant twist. She was laughing at something off camera. Her eyes were bright, alive. The caption read, "Marcus Webb and artist Simone Webb at the opening of her exhibition Heart Series, 2013. Zara stared at the screen. Simone Webb. Her mother. She opened another tab, searched for Simone Webb artist, found exhibition reviews, gallery listings, images of paintings, abstract pieces in blues and golds and deep reds that seemed to pulse with emotion even through a computer screen. She clicked on image after image, found more photos of her father, younger, smiling, confident, standing with artists, shaking hands with collectors, speaking at openings. This wasn't a janitor. This was someone else entirely. Zara heard the front door open downstairs, her father's footsteps in the hallway. She closed the laptop. "Zara, you home?" "Yeah, Dad, just doing homework." He appeared in the doorway, still wearing his work clothes. He looked tired. "How was school?" "Fine." "How was work?" "Same as always." Zara looked at him, really looked at him, tried to see the man in the photographs behind the man standing in front of her. "You okay, baby girl?" Marcus asked. "Yeah, just thinking about my project." He smiled. "You'll figure it out. You always do." He went to change. Zara heard his bedroom door close. She opened the laptop again and began downloading every article, every photo, every mention of Marcus Webb Fine Arts she could find. Her father had a whole life she knew nothing about, and she was going to find out why he'd never told her. Zara stopped asking questions, and that's how Marcus knew something had changed. November settled over Chicago with gray skies and early darkness. At breakfast, Zara ate her cereal in silence. On the walk to the bus stop, she kept her eyes forward. In the evenings, when Marcus came home from his shift, she'd look up from her homework with an expression he couldn't quite read. She was watching him, studying him, like she was trying to solve a puzzle she didn't have all the pieces to yet. Marcus didn't press. He'd learned over the years that Zara would talk when she was ready. At work, Victoria's campaign continued. She'd instituted what she called performance reviews for custodial staff. Every Wednesday at 8 p.m., Marcus had to report to a small office on the second floor, where his supervisor, a man named Bill Thompson, sat at a desk looking uncomfortable while Victoria stood behind him and went through a list of supposed infractions. The baseboards in Gallery 4 show visible dust accumulation. The men's restroom on the third floor had water spots on the mirror. Your break on Tuesday lasted 17 minutes instead of 15. Bill would nod and make notes. Marcus would stand there and take it. Victoria would smile. The performance reviews lasted exactly 30 minutes, not a second less. One Wednesday evening, Marcus arrived at the office to find Victoria already seated at Bill's desk. Bill stood near the wall, his hands in his pockets. "Sit," Victoria said, gesturing to the chair across from her. Marcus sat. She pulled up photos on her phone, showed him images of corners he'd supposedly missed, surfaces that weren't quite clean enough, trash bins that had been photographed at angles that made them look fuller than they were. "This is unacceptable," she said. "We have standards, expectations. People like us depend on people like you to maintain them." Marcus kept his expression neutral. "Do you have anything to say?" Victoria asked. "No, ma'am." Her smile tightened. She'd wanted a reaction, an argument, something she could use. "You're dismissed," she said. Marcus stood and left. Bill followed him into the hallway. "Marcus, I'm sorry. I don't." "It's fine, Bill." "It's not fine. She's targeting you." Marcus looked at the older man. Bill had worked at the museum for 26 years. He'd seen a lot. He knew what this was. "Just keep doing your job," Marcus said quietly. "That's all any of us can do." He walked away before Bill could respond. Later that night, during his break, Marcus sat in the staff room with a cup of coffee and watched Zara through the doorway. She was in the gallery, sitting on a bench with her sketchbook, drawing one of the sculptures. The pencil moved across the page in quick, confident strokes. She had Simone's hands, Simone's focus. The memory hit him like it always did, sudden, sharp. Simone in their old apartment, standing at an easel near the window, afternoon light catching the brown of her skin and making it glow. She was pregnant, 7 months along, her hand resting absently on the curve of her belly while she worked on a canvas covered in blues and golds. "What do you think?" she'd asked without turning around. Marcus had crossed the room and stood behind her, his arms circling her waist. "I think it's the best thing you've ever done. You say that about everything I paint, because it's always true." She'd laughed and leaned back against him. "We're going to need a bigger place. 2 kids, all my supplies, your endless gallery catalogs. This apartment won't hold us. Then we'll find something bigger. With a studio for me, with whatever you want." She'd turned in his arms and kissed him. "I love you, Marcus Webb. I love you more." It had been a Tuesday afternoon in April. Simone had an appointment at the gallery to discuss her upcoming exhibition. Marcus was following in his own car because he had a meeting across town afterward. They'd been at a red light when the drunk driver ran it. Marcus had seen the whole thing, the truck, the impact, the way Simone's car crumpled, the way it spun and came to rest against the light pole. He'd called 911, ran to her car, held her hand while she died. The paramedics told him later that there was nothing anyone could have done. The impact had been too severe. She'd been gone before they arrived. Their son had been gone too. Marcus had buried them together on a Thursday. 5-year-old Zara had stood beside him in a black dress, holding his hand, too young to fully understand that her mother wasn't coming back. A week later, Marcus's business partner had come to him with news about the fraud. Years of it, systematically stealing from artists and investors, hiding it in the books, using Marcus's reputation to keep anyone from looking too closely. Marcus could have fought it, could have gone public, claimed ignorance, let lawyers sort it out. But it would have meant dragging Simone's name through depositions and investigations. It would have meant turning their shared dream into a tabloid story. So Marcus had chosen differently. He'd liquidated every gallery, sold every asset, used the money to repay every artist who'd been cheated, every investor who'd been lied to. It had taken everything he'd built, but he'd made it right. What remained, about $8 million in accounts he'd saved from the wreckage he'd never touched, couldn't touch. It felt like blood money. A reminder of everything he'd failed to see, failed to protect. He'd taken Zara and left. Found the cheapest apartment he could. Got a job that didn't require him to trust anyone or make decisions that mattered. For 7 years, he'd lived like this. Simple, quiet, small. And it had been enough. Because Zara was safe. Zara was loved. Zara was all that mattered. Marcus blinked. The staff room came back into focus. His coffee had gone cold. Through the doorway, Zara was still drawing. "Marcus?" He turned. Dr. Elaine Harris stood in the doorway, her expression serious. "Can I have a word?" They walked to a quiet corner of the third-floor gallery. Harris glanced around to make sure they were alone. I need to tell you something, she said, and I need you to know that I'm only telling you this because I respect you and because I think you deserve to know what's coming. Marcus waited. I knew Simone's work, Harris said quietly. I attended her exhibition in 2013, the Heart Series. It was extraordinary. Marcus's chest tightened. I've suspected for years who you are, Harris continued, but I respected your privacy, respected your reasons for stepping away. Why are you telling me this now? Harris's expression hardened. Because Victoria is building a case to terminate you. She's documenting everything, photographing everything. She's convinced the board that the custodial department needs restructuring, and she's positioning you as the example. Marcus nodded slowly. He'd suspected as much. I tried to intervene, Harris said, but she has the votes, she has her family's money behind her, and she's determined. I understand. Do you? Harris looked at him carefully. Because I don't think you do. This woman is out for blood, Marcus. She's not going to stop until you're gone. The gallery was quiet around them. Somewhere in the distance, a security guard's radio crackled. Thank you for telling me, Marcus said. Harris studied his face for a long moment. Then she sighed. If there's anything I can do, there isn't, but I appreciate the warning. She left him standing there alone. Marcus walked back toward the staff room. Through the doorway, he could see Zara packing up her sketchbook. She looked up and met his eyes. For just a second, he saw it again. That watching, that studying, like she knew something she wasn't saying. And Marcus realized with a cold certainty that his daughter had been doing exactly what he'd taught her to do, asking questions, finding answers, piecing together truth. She'd figured out who he used to be, and she was waiting to see what he was going to do about it. The week before Thanksgiving, Zara came home from school and spread 42 pages of printouts across their kitchen table. Marcus walked in from the bedroom and stopped in the doorway. He'd been asleep for maybe 3 hours. His shift had run late because Victoria had shown up at 5 a.m. to photograph the galleries before he'd finished cleaning them. He looked at the table, at the articles, at the photographs, at his daughter's face. Hi, Dad, Zara said quietly. Marcus's throat went dry. He recognized the images even from across the room. Gallery openings, exhibition announcements, a photo of him and Simone at the launch of her Heart Series show. He crossed to the table slowly and picked up the nearest printout. It was an article from 2015, sympathetic and vague, with the headline, Art World Loss, Prominent Gallerist Disappears Following Personal Tragedy. Where did you find all this? His voice came out steadier than he felt. Google, the library archives, old art magazines. Zara watched him carefully. I've been working on my school project, the one about someone I admire. Marcus set the article down. And I realized, I don't know anything about you, Zara continued. Not really, just what we do now, but not who you were before. The kitchen felt smaller than it had a minute ago. The afternoon light coming through the window seemed too bright. Marcus pulled out a chair and sat down. Okay, he said. Zara pulled another printout from the stack. This one's from 2013. It says Marcus Webb Fine Arts had 5 locations and represented some of the best emerging artists in the Midwest. She looked up. That's you, right? That was your company? Yes. And this woman. Zara slid a photo across the table. Simone at an exhibition, laughing at something off camera, her hand resting on her pregnant belly. This is my mom. Marcus's chest tightened. Yes. She was a painter. Her work was in galleries. People bought it. They did. Zara was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. What happened, Dad? Why did you stop? Marcus looked at his daughter, at her dark eyes that were so much like Simone's, at the way she sat with her shoulders straight, bracing for whatever answer he was about to give. He'd known this conversation would come eventually, had practiced versions of it in his head over the years, but none of those rehearsed words felt right now that the moment was actually here. Your mom died in a car accident, he said slowly. You know that part. One was 5. I remember some of it. What you don't know is that she was pregnant. We were going to have a son. Marcus's hands rested flat on the table. He died with her. Zara's breath caught. She hadn't known that. After the funeral, I found out my business partner had been stealing from the artists I represented, from investors. He'd been doing it for years, using my name to cover it up. The fraud scandal, Zara said, touching one of the articles. I could have fought it, hired lawyers, claimed I didn't know. Marcus met her eyes. But it would have meant investigations, reporters. Your mother's name dragged through all of it, and I couldn't. His voice cracked slightly. He steadied it. I couldn't let that happen to her memory. So you paid everyone back? Every cent I could. Even though it wasn't your fault. It was my company, my responsibility. Zara was quiet, processing. Outside, a car horn honked. Someone's dog barked, normal sounds from a normal world that felt very far away right now. There's money left, she said finally. In the articles about the settlements, they mention that you salvaged some of the assets. Where is it? In accounts I don't touch. Why not? Marcus didn't have a simple answer to that. How did he explain that the money felt like evidence of everything he'd failed to see, failed to protect? That using it would mean accepting the world that had taken Simone from him? Because this life, he said instead, gesturing around their small kitchen, is what I can handle. It's simple. It's honest. It's just you and me, and that's enough. Zara looked at him for a long time. Then she asked the question that cut deeper than all the others. Are you happy, Dad? Marcus opened his mouth. Closed it. The honest answer was complicated. He was happy when he watched Zara laugh, happy in the quiet moments when they cooked dinner together or she told him about her day. But happy overall? Happy with the man he'd become? He didn't know. I don't think happiness is the point, he said finally. I think showing up for you is the point. Being here, being present. But you gave up everything. I gave up things. I kept what mattered. Zara's eyes were wet now. She wiped them quickly. That lady at the museum, the mean one. Does she know who you are? No. Are you going to tell her? Why would I? Because she's being awful to you. Because it's not fair. Marcus reached across the table and took his daughter's hand. Her fingers were small in his, her skin warm. Life isn't fair, baby girl. Your mom dying wasn't fair. You growing up without her wasn't fair. But we don't get to control what other people do. We only get to control who we are when they do it. But she's trying to get you fired. Marcus went still. How do you know that? I heard you talking to Dr. Harris last week. You didn't know I was in the gallery. Of course she'd overheard. Zara saw everything, heard everything, just like Simone had. Yeah, Marcus said quietly. She probably is. What are you going to do? My job, the best I can. That's all I can control. Zara pulled her hand back. Frustration flashed across her face. That's not enough. You should fight back. You should tell everyone who you really are. And what would that change? Everything. She'd have to stop. She'd look stupid. People would know she was being mean to someone who used to have money, who used to own galleries. Marcus shook his head. That doesn't make me worth more, Zara. It doesn't make her behavior worse. Wrong is wrong, no matter who it happens to. Zara's jaw set in that stubborn way that reminded Marcus so much of her mother it hurt. I don't like this, she said. I know. I don't like watching her be mean to you. I know. And I don't like that you just take it. Marcus stood and started gathering the printouts. He stacked them carefully, organizing them by date, without really thinking about it. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. Some battles aren't worth fighting. Some things you let go because holding on to them does more damage than letting them be. Is that what you did with the galleries? Let them go, yes. And the money? Yes. And Mom? The question landed like a punch. Marcus's hands stilled on the papers. I didn't let your mother go, he said quietly. I carry her every single day. In every choice I make. In every moment I spend with you. Zara's expression softened. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it's okay. She wiped her eyes again. Can I keep these? For my project? Marcus looked at the stack of printouts. His whole former life distilled down to 42 pages. Yeah, you can keep them. Thanks, Dad. He kissed the top of her head and went to start dinner. The next morning, Marcus arrived at work to find a memo taped to his locker. The museum was implementing a staff excellence audit for all custodial employees. Evaluations would be conducted weekly. Performance standards were being revised upward. Failure to meet standards would result in progressive discipline up to and including termination. The memo was signed by Victoria Ashford, Board of Trustees. Bill Thompson caught Marcus in the hallway an hour later. You see the memo? I saw it. She's gunning for you, Marcus. This whole audit is because of you. Marcus nodded. He'd figured as much. Dr. Harris tried to fight it in the board meeting, but Victoria's got the votes. She's claiming it's about fiscal responsibility, but we all know what it really is. It's fine, Bill. It's not fine. She's talking about cutting positions, night shift positions, plural. Marcus looked at him. How many? 3, maybe 4. Budget reasons, she says. But she's already got your name on the list. The hallway was quiet. Somewhere down the corridor, a radiator clanked. "Thanks for telling me," Marcus said. He finished his shift without incident, cleaned every surface twice, made sure every corner was spotless. When he got home, there was a flyer tucked into their front door: Museum Annual Gala, December 15th, major fundraising event, silent auction, 200 expected attendees, 3 weeks away. Marcus crumpled the flyer and tossed it in the recycling. Then he went inside to wake Zara for school, already knowing that in 3 weeks, something was going to break, and he had no idea whether he'd be ready when it did. 2 weeks before the gala, Dr. Kemp. Elaine Harris found Marcus during his break and asked if they could talk privately. They walked to a storage room on the 4th floor. The air was cooler up here, away from the climate-controlled galleries. Harris closed the door behind them and pulled out her phone. "I need to show you something," she said. She opened an email and turned the screen toward him. It was the auction catalog for the gala, high-value pieces being sold to fund new acquisitions. Marcus scrolled through images of sculptures and paintings, donors, and estimated values. Then he stopped. His breath caught. The painting was abstract, mostly blues and deep golds, with streaks of crimson that seemed to pulse even through the digital image. The brushwork was distinctive, layered, and emotional in a way that made it feel alive. He knew this painting. He'd watched it being created. "Anonymous donor, 2016, Harris said quietly, reading the description. "Untitled, Heart Series number 7, artist Simone Webb. Estimated value, $340,000. Marcus couldn't look away from the screen. Simone had painted this piece in the final weeks of her life. She'd been 8 months pregnant, working in their home studio with afternoon light streaming through the windows. He'd asked her what the painting meant, and she'd smiled and said it was about love that exists in multiple layers. The love between partners, the love for a child not yet born, the love that remains even when everything else falls away. "I donated it," Marcus said. His voice sounded distant, like it was coming from somewhere else. "In 2016, the museum was struggling. I couldn't keep it, but I didn't want it sold to some private collector who'd lock it away." Harris nodded. "I thought it might be yours. I remember this piece from her exhibition." Marcus handed the phone back. His hands were steady, but something in his chest felt tight. "Victoria's made it the centerpiece of the auction," Harris continued. "She's been promoting it heavily, talking about it as an investment opportunity, a chance to own work from an artist whose reputation is growing posthumously. She doesn't know Simone was my wife. No, and she doesn't know you're the donor." Harris paused. "You could withdraw it, claim it as yours, stop the auction." Marcus shook his head. "That would raise questions I can't answer. People would want to know why a janitor donated a $300,000 painting." "Marcus, it's fine. Let her have it." Harris's expression tightened. "She's planning to bid on it herself, as a public display. She's told half the board about it already." The storage room was quiet except for the hum of the ventilation system. Dust motes drifted through the air near a small window. "Simone would have wanted the painting in a museum," Marcus said finally. "She always said art belonged where people could see it, where it could do something beyond just exist. Even if Victoria owns it, the museum still has it. That's what matters." Harris studied his face for a long moment. Then she put her phone away and changed the subject. "There's something else you should know. Victoria's requiring you to work the gala." Marcus had been expecting this. "As custodial staff, as serving staff. She's convinced the board that the event needs extra servers. Your name is on the list." "Okay, Marcus, this is deliberate. She's forcing you into a position where donors will see you, where she can." Harris stopped, took a breath, "where she can make an example of you in front of the people who matter to her." "I know. And you're going to do it anyway." "It's my job." Harris looked at him like she was trying to understand something that didn't make sense. "You don't have to accept this. You could fight back. You could." "I could what? File a complaint? Take it to the board? We both know how that would end." The older woman's shoulders sagged slightly. "I wish you'd let me help. You are helping. By telling me what's coming." Marcus moved toward the door. "I appreciate it, Dr. Harris. I do." She didn't try to stop him, just watched as he left the storage room and headed back to his cart. The next morning, a memo appeared on the staff bulletin board. All serving staff for the December 15th gala needed to pick up uniforms by the 10th. Names were listed. Marcus's was third from the top. He picked up his uniform on schedule. Black pants, white shirt, black vest, bow tie. The vest was slightly too small. The bow tie felt like a noose. Victoria walked past him while he was signing for it. She didn't say anything, just smiled. That evening, Zara came home from school with a permission slip. The museum's doing a youth program during the gala, she said, setting the paper on the kitchen table. They're teaching kids about art conservation. Can I go? Marcus looked at the slip. It was legitimate. Dr. Harris's signature was at the bottom as the supervising curator. You want to spend your Friday night at a museum. I want to see the event. Zara met his eyes. I want to be there. There was something in her expression that made Marcus pause, a determination that reminded him of the way she'd looked when she confronted him about his past. Why? Because you'll be there, and I want to see it. See what? Whatever happens. Marcus set the permission slip down. Outside, the December wind rattled the windows. Christmas lights were starting to appear on neighboring houses, strings of color against the early darkness. It's just a gala, Zara. Fancy people in fancy clothes, nothing's going to happen. Then why do you look worried? He wasn't worried. Or maybe he was. He didn't know anymore. Everything had started to feel like it was building towards something he couldn't see clearly yet. I'm not worried, he said. So I can go? Marcus looked at his daughter, at the fierce intelligence in her eyes, at the set of her jaw that was pure Simone. He should say no, should keep her away from whatever Victoria was planning. But Zara was 12 years old and smart enough to know when she was being protected from something. And Marcus had learned a long time ago that trying to shield her from the world only made her more determined to understand it. Okay, he said, you can go. Zara smiled, picked up the permission slip and headed to her room. Marcus sat at the kitchen table alone. In 2 weeks, he'd stand in a server's uniform in front of 200 donors and watch his late wife's painting be auctioned to the woman who'd spent the last 2 months trying to destroy him. And his daughter would be there to witness all of it, watching with those eyes that saw too much and understood more than she should. He didn't know what Zara was planning, but he knew she was planning something. And for the first time since this all started, Marcus felt the ground beneath him shift in a way that made him wonder if the quiet life he'd built was about to shatter completely, and if this time he wouldn't be able to protect either of them from the pieces. The Whitmore Museum sparkled like a jewel box on the night of December 15th. Marcus arrived through the employee entrance at 6 p.m., 2 hours before the gala started. The kitchen was already chaos, caterers shouting orders, servers rushing between stations, the smell of expensive food filling the air. He changed into his uniform in the locker room, adjusting the too small vest and the bow tie that pulled tight against his throat. By 8, 200 guests filled the main atrium. The museum had been transformed. Track lighting cast warm glows across the marble floors. White-clothed tables lined the perimeter, each decorated with arrangements of winter flowers. A string quartet played near the East Gallery. Donors moved through the space in designer gowns and tailored suits, their voices echoing off the high ceilings, champagne glasses catching the light. Marcus carried a tray of drinks through the crowd. He moved with the practiced efficiency he'd learned years ago, offering glasses with a slight nod, stepping aside when people reached past him without acknowledgement. Most guests didn't look at his face. To them, he was part of the scenery, functional, forgettable, beneath notice. A woman in pearls took a glass without saying thank you. A man in a tuxedo grabbed two and walked away mid-sentence with his companion. Another guest set an empty glass on Marcus's tray without breaking stride. Marcus kept his expression neutral. Near the auction display, Victoria Ashford held court. She wore a floor-length gown in deep emerald, her blonde hair swept into an elegant twist, diamonds at her throat and wrists. She laughed at something a silver-haired man said, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Around her, a small crowd of donors and board members listened as she gestured toward the painting mounted on the display wall, Simone's painting. Marcus could see it from across the atrium. The blues and golds seemed to glow under the gallery lights, the crimson streaks pulsing with that same emotional intensity he remembered from watching it being created. A small placard beneath it read, Lot 7 Untitled, Heart Series Number Scrome. 7. Simone Webb, Anonymous Donor, 2016, Opening Bid, $250,000. This piece represents an important investment opportunity, Victoria was saying, her voice carrying. The artist's work has been gaining significant posthumous recognition. Acquiring it now positions the buyer at the forefront of an emerging market. She didn't know Simone had been a person, a wife, a mother. She only saw numbers and status. Marcus moved away, refilling his tray. In the youth program area near the second-floor balcony, Zara sat at a table with a dozen other kids. A museum educator was explaining conservation techniques, showing them how restorers examined paintings under different light spectrums. But Zara wasn't paying attention to the demonstration. Her eyes tracked across the atrium below, watching her father move through the crowd, watching Victoria near the painting. The auction began at 9:30. Gerald Whitmore took the podium near the display wall and welcomed the guests. He thanked the donors for their continued support, mentioned the museum's expansion plans, and introduced the auctioneer, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a voice trained to carry authority. Lot 1, the auctioneer began. A bronze sculpture by Ramirez, circa 2019. Marcus stood near the kitchen entrance, his tray momentarily empty. He watched the auction proceed. Sculptures sold for tens of thousands. Paintings went for six figures. Donors raised their paddles with casual confidence, bidding amounts that could have paid Marcus's rent for years. Then Lot 7 came up. Untitled, Heart Series number 7, the auctioneer announced. Oil on Canvas by Simone Webb. Anonymous donor, 2016, will open bidding at $250,000. 3 paddles went up immediately. The auctioneer's voice moved efficiently through the increments. 260, 275, 290. One bidder dropped out, then another. Victoria raised her paddle. 300,000. A man near the front countered. 320. Victoria didn't hesitate. 340. The atrium went quiet. The man considered, then lowered his paddle. The auctioneer scanned the room. $340,000. Going once, going twice. He brought down the gavel. Sold to paddle number 47. Victoria's smile was radiant, triumphant. Applause rippled through the crowd. Board members congratulated her. The auctioneer moved to the next lot. Victoria stood near the painting, her hand resting possessively on the frame, accepting compliments from donors who gathered around her. The auction continued for another 30 minutes. Then guests moved into the reception phase, more champagne, more conversation, more networking among Chicago's wealthy elite. Marcus was refilling glasses near the West Gallery when he heard Victoria's voice spike above the ambient noise. "Excuse me, excuse me." The crowd near her went quiet. People turned. Victoria was examining the painting's frame, her face tight with displeasure. She gestured toward a corner of the gilded wood. "There's a mark here, a smudge. This painting has been damaged." Dr. Harris moved closer. "Ms. Ashford, I'm sure it's nothing." "It's not nothing. This is a $340,000 acquisition, and it's been mishandled." Victoria's voice rose, performing for the audience gathering around her. "I want to know which member of the custodial staff was responsible for moving this piece." Harris's expression tightened. "The painting hasn't been moved. It's been in position since this afternoon. Then someone touched it. Someone who doesn't understand how to handle valuable art." Victoria scanned the room. Her eyes landed on Marcus. She pointed. "Him. I've seen him working near the display all evening." 200 heads turned. Marcus stood 20 feet away, tray in hand, his dark skin standing out among the sea of formal wear. "I watched him handling equipment near this painting earlier," Victoria continued. Her voice carried to every corner of the atrium. "He was careless, incompetent, and now there's visible damage to a piece I just purchased." "Ms. Ashford," Harris said quietly. "Marcus didn't touch. I want him terminated. Immediately." Victoria's voice was cold steel. "This is exactly the kind of negligence I've been documenting for months. This man is a liability to this institution, and I'm demanding his immediate dismissal." The crowd murmured. A few people pulled out their phones. Marcus set his tray on a nearby table. His hands were steady. His breathing was controlled. 7 years of staying invisible. 7 years of accepting whatever came. 7 years of choosing silence over confrontation. All of it led to this moment. Security guards moved toward him. Victoria continued, her voice loud and satisfied. "People like us invest in this museum because we trust it to maintain standards, to employ people who understand the value of what they're protecting. This man clearly doesn't belong here." The atrium had gone completely still. On the second-floor balcony, Zara stood at the railing, her hands gripping the metal. Tears streamed down her face. She was 12 years old, watching her father be destroyed in front of strangers, and she was powerless to stop it. Then Dr. Elaine Harris stepped into the center of the atrium. Her voice, when it came, was clear and commanding, and carried the weight of 22 years of expertise. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" Victoria's smile faltered. The crowd shifted, 200 faces turning toward Dr. Harris. "I'm sorry," Victoria said. Harris stepped closer to the center of the atrium. Her voice carried with the authority of someone who had spent 22 years earning respect in this building. "That man you just accused of incompetence is Marcus Webb, the founder of Marcus Webb Fine Arts, one of the most respected gallerists in the Midwest for over a decade." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several people pulled out their phones. Victoria's face went rigid. I don't know what. He built 5 galleries across the region, Harris continued. Represented some of the finest emerging artists of the 2010s. He had an eye for talent that most collectors would kill for, and he had a reputation for integrity that was unmatched in the industry. A few of the older donors were nodding, remembering. Marcus stood perfectly still, his dark skin catching the gallery lights, his hands loose at his sides. Harris turned toward the painting on the display wall. That piece you just purchased for $340,000 is an original work by Simone Webb. She was a brilliant abstract painter. Her work is gaining significant recognition in the art world. Harris paused. She was also Marcus's wife. The atrium went completely silent. Simone died in 2014, Harris said quietly. Tragically. And Marcus donated this painting to the museum anonymously 2 years later. Not because he needed the tax write-off, not because he wanted recognition, but because he believed art belongs where people can see it. Victoria's hand dropped from the painting's frame. Her face had gone pale. You've spent the last 2 months documenting this man's supposed failures, Harris continued. Photographing dust, timing his breaks, building a case for his termination. But what you didn't know is that Marcus Webb has forgotten more about art and museums than most of us will ever learn. Board Chairman Gerald Whitmore stepped forward from the crowd, his expression stricken. Dr. Harris, I'm not finished. Harris's voice remained calm, measured, but underneath it was steel. This man walked away from a multi-million-dollar business, lost his wife and his unborn child, discovered his partner had been defrauding the very artists he'd spent years trying to help, and instead of fighting publicly, instead of protecting his own reputation, he liquidated everything and personally repaid every cent that had been stolen. He chose integrity over ego. He chose his daughter over revenge. People were whispering now. Phones were up. Cameras pointed at Marcus. A woman near the front gasped softly. I remember the gallery closures, the scandal. That was you? Marcus didn't respond. Victoria turned toward him. Her emerald gown suddenly looked too bright, her diamonds too heavy. You should have told me. You should have. Why? Marcus's voice was quiet. Would it have changed anything? The question hung in the air. Victoria's mouth opened. Closed. She had no answer. Because they both knew the truth. If Marcus had been wearing a suit instead of a uniform, if his business card had said gallery owner instead of custodian, Victoria would have treated him differently. Not because he was a different person, because she only saw value in titles and money. Around the atrium, donors who had ignored Marcus all evening now stared. The woman who'd taken champagne without saying thank you looked ashamed. The man who grabbed 2 glasses and walked away wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. Gerald Whitmore stepped forward, his face red. Miss Pord, Ashford, perhaps we should discuss this. Don't. Victoria's voice cracked. She looked around the room at the faces watching her, at the phones recording, at the witnesses to her second public humiliation in 4 months. She'd stood at an altar in 4th Presbyterian Church and been left alone in front of 300 people. Now she stood in a museum she'd tried to control, exposed as cruel and small in front of 200 donors who would talk about this for years. Other trustees were already stepping away from her, creating distance. Marcus looked at Victoria, really looked at her. At the rage and pain and desperation that had driven her to spend 2 months trying to destroy a man whose only crime was being in the wrong place when she needed someone to hurt. He could have destroyed her with a sentence, could have listed every petty cruelty, every calculated humiliation, every moment she'd wielded her power like a weapon. The entire room was waiting for it. Instead, Marcus spoke softly. I know what it's like to be humiliated publicly. His voice was steady, kind even. I know what it does to you, how it changes the way you see the world, how it makes you want to hurt someone else just so you're not the only one carrying that weight. Victoria's eyes were wet. But cruelty born from pain never heals the wound, Marcus continued. It just spreads it to others. The words landed like stones in still water. Marcus reached up and undid his bow tie, removed the too small vest, folded it carefully, and placed it on a nearby table. The server's uniform had never fit him properly anyway. Then he turned toward the exit. The crowd parted. On the second-floor balcony, Zara pushed through the youth program group and ran for the stairs. Her braids flew behind her as she took the steps 2 at a time. She reached the main floor just as Marcus approached the atrium's glass doors. Dad. He stopped, turned. Zara ran to him and wrapped her arms around his waist. He held her close, one hand resting on her head. "Can we go home?" she whispered. "Yeah, baby girl, we can go." They walked to the exit together, father and daughter, his hand holding hers, the December cold waiting beyond the glass. Behind them, the gala descended into chaos, donors pulling out phones, board members huddling, Victoria standing alone near a painting she'd purchased without understanding what it meant, Gerald Whitmore trying to regain control of a room that had already decided the story. But Marcus and Zara didn't look back. They pushed through the glass doors and stepped into the Chicago night. The air was sharp and clean. Streetlights cast orange halos on the sidewalk. Traffic hummed in the distance. Marcus took a deep breath. The first real breath he'd taken in 7 years. He'd spent so long trying to stay invisible, trying to be small enough that the world couldn't hurt him again. But tonight, in front of 200 witnesses, he'd been seen, and instead of being destroyed, he'd been freed. Zara looked up at him. Her eyes were bright. "That was really cool, Dad." Marcus smiled. Yeah? You didn't yell. You didn't get mad. You just told the truth and walked away. Sometimes that's the strongest thing you can do. They walked toward the parking garage where Marcus's aging Honda waited. The museum glowed behind them like a jewel box. But neither of them turned around to look at it, because whatever happened next, whatever consequences came from tonight, whatever rebuilding needed to be done, they would face it the way they'd faced everything else for 7 years, together. 3 months later, spring arrived in Chicago. Marcus sat in Dr. Elaine Harris's office on a Tuesday afternoon, reviewing portfolio submissions for the Simone Webb Fellowship. Sunlight streamed through the windows overlooking Millennium Park. The trees outside were starting to bud, green pushing through winter brown. "This one," Marcus said, sliding a folder across the desk. "The mixed media series. There's something there." Harris looked at the images. A young woman from Detroit, 23, working in collage and found objects. The pieces were raw, urgent, trying to say something about displacement and belonging. "I see it," Harris said. She made a note. "That makes 3. The fellowship had launched in January. Funded by the museum, named for Simone, it provided emerging artists with studio space, materials, and a small stipend for 6 months. No strings attached, just support and space to create. Marcus worked 3 days a week, part-time, on his terms, using knowledge he'd buried for 7 years to build something that mattered without the weight of ownership crushing him. It felt right, like breathing properly for the first time in a long time. "Coffee?" Harris asked. "I should get going. Zara has a science fair tonight." Harris smiled. "Give her my congratulations on the essay." Zara's school project had earned top marks, not because she'd written about Marcus Webb, the gallery owner, but because she'd written about her father as someone who taught her that wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts or business cards, that the richest people she knew were the ones who chose love when it would have been easier to choose anger. Her teacher had cried reading it. Marcus gathered his things and left the museum through the main entrance. Not the employee door, not the basement stairs, the front doors like anyone else. The apartment Marcus and Zara had moved to in February was only 6 blocks from their old row house. 2 bedrooms instead of 1, a kitchen with counter space, windows that actually opened not because they needed it, because they wanted it, small changes that acknowledged their circumstances without abandoning the values that had sustained them. The rent was still modest, Marcus still lived on what he earned, but the apartment felt different, like possibility instead of penance. That evening, Marcus stood in the gymnasium of Zara's school and watched her explain her science project to a judge. Something about water filtration and activated charcoal. She was confident, articulate, her braids pulled back with a headband, her voice steady. When the judge moved on, Zara grinned at Marcus. "How'd I do? You were perfect." They walked home through the March twilight. The air was cool but not cold. Spring promised but not yet delivered. "Dad?" Zara said. "Yeah? Do you think Mom would be proud of us?" Marcus looked down at his daughter, at the fierce intelligence in her eyes, the set of her shoulders that was pure Simone. "I think she'd be proud of you, always." "What about you?" The question caught him. Marcus thought about the last 3 months, the fellowship, the apartment, the quiet rebuilding of something that felt like a life instead of an apology. "I think she'd want me to be happy," he said finally, "and I'm getting there." On Sunday afternoon, Marcus and Zara took the train downtown to the Whitmore Museum. They walked through the familiar galleries, past sculptures and installations Marcus had cleaned 1,000 times in the dark. But today the museum was bright and full of visitors, and Marcus moved through it as a guest, not staff. The contemporary wing had been reorganized. Simone's painting now hung in a place of prominence on the east wall. Gallery lights positioned to catch the blues and golds and crimsons that pulsed with emotion even after all these years. A new placard had been installed beside it. Untitled, Heart Series Number 7, Simone Webb, 1982, 2014 oil. Oil on canvas, 2014 gift of Marcus Webb, in loving memory. Part of the permanent collection, Marcus and Zara stood in front of the painting together. The gallery around them hummed with quiet conversation. Visitors moved past, pausing to look, moving on. The painting existed here, public and alive, exactly where Simone had always wanted her work to be. She was really good, Zara said softly. She was. Do you miss her? Every day. Zara slipped her hand into Marcus's. Her fingers were warm, small, but getting bigger. Tell me a story about her, she said, one I haven't heard. Marcus looked at the painting. At the layers of color Simone had built up over weeks, each one adding depth and complexity to what had started as a simple idea. The day she finished this piece, Marcus said, she stood back and looked at it for about 10 minutes without saying anything. I was worried something was wrong. Then she started laughing and crying at the same time. Why? I asked her that. She said it was because she'd finally figured out how to paint what love felt like. Not happy love or sad love, just love, all of it together, the way it exists in layers, the way it hurts and heals at the same time. Zara studied the painting with new eyes. I think I see it, she said. Yeah? Yeah. It's like how I can be sad about not having a mom but happy that I have you, both things at once. Marcus's throat tightened. He squeezed Zara's hand. They stood there together for a few more minutes. Then Zara tugged his hand gently. Can we get ice cream? Marcus smiled. Yeah, we can get ice cream. They walked back through the museum, past galleries and installations, through the main atrium where chandeliers hung from the ceiling and light poured through glass walls. 3 months ago, Marcus had stood here in a server's uniform, invisible and voiceless. Now he walked through as himself. Changed, but not broken. Rebuilding, but not starting over. They pushed through the front doors into afternoon sunlight. The city stretched out around them. Chicago in early March, still cold but warming, still gray but brightening. Cars moved past. People walked dogs. Someone played saxophone on a corner for spare change. Marcus and Zara walked toward the ice cream shop 3 blocks north. Zara talked about her science fair, about a book she was reading, about whether they should get a cat. Marcus listened and responded and felt something in his chest that had been clenched for 7 years start to loosen. Victoria Ashford had resigned from the museum board the week after the gala. No one knew where she'd gone, Marcus hadn't asked. He hoped, distantly, that she found whatever she was looking for, that the humiliation she'd endured twice in 4 months would teach her something other than bitterness. But that wasn't his story to worry about anymore. His story was this. A Sunday afternoon with his daughter, walking toward ice cream, sunlight on his face, Simone's painting hanging in the museum where it belonged, and a life that wasn't measured in what he'd lost but in what he'd kept. They reached the ice cream shop. Zara ordered chocolate chip. Marcus got coffee. They sat at a small table by the window and watched people pass on the sidewalk. Dad, Zara said, spoon halfway to her mouth. Yeah, baby girl, I'm glad we're us. Marcus smiled. Me too. Outside, the city moved forward. Inside, a father and daughter shared ice cream and talked about nothing important and everything that mattered. And for the first time in 7 years, Marcus Webb looked at his life and saw not what he'd given up, but what he'd chosen to keep. True wealth, he'd learned, was never about the money in your accounts or the status attached to your name. It was measured in the quiet moments, the small joys, the people who stayed, the values you refused to compromise, the person you chose to be when the world tried to make you someone else. And by that measure, Marcus Webb was the richest man he knew.